All right, we're going to start where we left off. Manuscript theft. Chapter 4. Despite having been missing for nearly 2 centuries, investigations into the disappearance of the Book of Mormon's lost manuscript have scarcely been done at all. Instead, Martin Harris's antagonistic wife, Lucy Harris, has been generally assumed to be the only suspect worth considering, and the case was closed before it was ever opened. This chapter will open the case of the Book of Mormon manuscript theft, exploring in detail how the manuscript came to be stolen and examining the evidence for the identity of the thieves. The story of the manuscript's loss begins where we left off in the story of its translation. Joseph Smith and Martin Harris carried out their respective roles in the translation process for several weeks, but practical considerations entailed that sooner or later they must pause. Emma was about to deliver the couple's first child, and Martin was feeling pressure to return home after having parted with his children and wife and forsaken his farm for most of the spring. It also appears that Joseph and Martin were running out of paper. For that source, look at Joseph Knight Sr., Manuscript of the History of Joseph Smith. In anticipation of a break in the work, Martin requested that he be permitted to take the translation manuscript home with him to show others. You can see Joseph Smith History, circa summer of 1832. There's more to the information about the paper running out. Joseph Knight recalled giving Joseph a little money to buy paper. That's how it's spelled, B-U-O-Y, which probably means it was buy paper. But I've never had an O in buy, but there you go. In January 1829, since as discussed below, if any translation work was done during the remainder of 1828 after the manuscript lost, this suggests that Joseph was already low on paper for translation when the work halted in June 1828. The paper used for the translation is further discussed in the following chapter. All right, so we wanted to show others. He likely also requested to again take the plate facsimile that he'd shown to Anton. Such permission would enable him to display both the characters which the learned could not read and the translation which Joseph had read from the plates. See John A. Clark's Gleanings by the way. That Martin took the Anton script and lost it with the translation manuscript is suggested by 2 considerations. No one describes seeing that transcript after 1828, and none of the still existing transcripts match the one described by Anton. See Charles Anton to E.D. Howe, February 17, 1834, and Charles Anton to Thomas Winthrop Coit, April 3, 1841. In response to Martin's request to take the documents, Joseph petitioned God for permission, but was denied through the interpreters. At Martin's urging, Joseph again asked, resulting again with the same answer. After further teasing from Martin, and as the translation neared a pause, Joseph agreed to make a third inquiry, upon which permission was finally granted for Martin to show others the manuscript, along with the commandment that it be limited to only 5 designated family members. His brother preserved Harris his own life. His father, the 5 members are going to be, quote, his brother preserved Harris? That's the name, is preserved? Huh. His brother preserved Harris, his own wife, his father, and his also mother, and Mrs. Cobb, a sister to his wife. See Joseph Smith, A History of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Before taking the manuscript, Martin had to covenant to obey the word of the Lord that restricted the manuscript's audience to those 5. See Smith's History circa the summer of 1832. Martin's repeated requests were in part responsible for the manuscript loss. He had settled for the first or second answer. Had he settled for the first or second answer, the curious reader would not be holding the present book in his or her hands, but would instead be reading a version of the Book of Mormon that contains many of the missing stories this volume intends to reconstruct. Given the risks and severity of the consequences of Martin's action, a question crucial to understanding the loss of this book is, why was Martin Harris so insistent on taking the manuscript home with him after already having been told no by God twice? Trouble in the Harris home. An obvious reason for Martin Harris to take the manuscript back with him was to satisfy skepticism at home. Martin's wife had been doubtful of and even antagonistic toward Joseph Smith's claims. Additionally, Martin's time away from his home and farm raised skepticism about him. From the family's perspective, Martin Harris was a man gone mad. See Pomeroy Tucker, Origin, Rise, and Progress of Mormonism. Martin's various travels in winter of 1828 to authenticate the character transcript between Palmyra, Harmony, Albany, Philadelphia, and New York City, and his subsequent journeys that spring to act as Joseph's scribe would likely have taken about 8 weeks in just travel time alone. See, Eldon Watson estimates that Martin spent 40 days traveling with the character transcript. This was followed by a journey to and from Harmony with his wife Lucy, which was then followed by his trip to begin scribing for Joseph, and his return trip after scribing, each of these 2 round trips adding about 8 days, bringing the estimated total to 56 days. 8 weeks. Eldon Watson, Approximate Book of Mormon Translation Timeline. Wow, that's a lot of time. On top of these, Martin spent some 8 weeks of the spring actually scribing for Joseph. You can see Stanley Kimball's The Anton Transcript, People, Primary Sources, and Problems. Martin thus sacrificed much of his winter and nearly his entire spring to assist with the translation, and the particular time period Martin chose to leave the farm to serve as a translation scribe was startling. The winter of 1827 to 1828, which has been called a season of extraordinary climatic anomalies, was so unseasonably warm as to bring an early planting season in the eastern United States, moving planting in upstate New York forward to mid-April. The time that Martin was assisting Joseph would have rivaled harvest as the busiest time of the year for a farmer in that region. You can see Cherry J. Mock, The Winter of 1827 to 1828 over Eastern North America, a season of extraordinary climatic anomalies, social impacts, and false spring. My thanks to Jeff Slinker for bringing this paper to my attention. During the time of his absence from the farm, Martin, who had a reputation as an expert farmer, should have been carrying out, or at least overseeing, the work of harrowing, plowing, planting, and otherwise preparing his ground to ensure the fall yield of flax, beans, pumpkins, corn, and other grains on which his livelihood depended. See, the month of May, in which Martin Harris spent entirely at scribing for Joseph, was not only a crucial time for planting, but also an optimal time for haying. Information about farming in Palmyra area was provided by Donald Enders and Emily Utt, both of the LDS Historic Sites Division. Personal communication from Emily Utt, July 20th, 2011. Instead, Martin spent that exact period from about April 12th through June 14th scribing the translation. Planting season, however, was not all Martin missed at home. While in Harmony with Joseph, Martin was absent from something even more momentous, the May 8 wedding of his daughter, Lucy Jr., to Flanders Dyke in Palmyra. Their marriage was announced on May 9th in 1828. See the Wayne Sentinel. Evidence that Martin's absence from these family events was causing trouble at home is visible in what Martin's wife was doing in his absence. On May 13, 5 days after Martin failed to show up to give his daughter's hand to Flanders Dyke A deed from Martin for 80 acres of his land appears in the Palmyra land records. The deed is made out to Martin's cousin and brother-in-law, Peter Harris, Lucy's brother. Martin and Lucy were biological first cousins. With this deed appears another from Peter Harris to Lucy for the same 80 acres of what had been Martin's land. This successions of deeds from Martin to Peter, then from Peter to Lucy, provided an indirect way for Martin to convey her dowry land to Lucy, circumventing laws about joint marital property. But how could Martin deed his land, even indirectly, to Lucy in his absence? The deeds in question were originally executed on November 29th, 1825. You can see this indenture, Martin Harris to Peter Harris, Wayne County, New York, November 29th, 1825. And indenture Peter Harris to Lucy Harris, Wayne County, New York, November 29th, 1925. New York Land Records, Wayne County Deeds, 1827 to 1828, Volume 5. Family History Library, Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm grateful for Michael H. McKay for putting me on to this source and Marie Thatcher for tracking it down. After their original signing, Lucy held on to these deeds for nearly 3 years before she felt the need to record them. Sudden recording of these deeds to give them full legal efficacy immediately after Martin missed their daughter's wedding communicates her intentions as clearly as any words could have. Upon her husband's failure to show up for the wedding, Lucy acted to give herself financial independence from Martin. She was taking an initial step towards separation. I have a very bad habit of watching YouTube videos about the train wreck of relationships in modern secular society on YouTube, and there is a prominent theme of women who start making exit plans, and it just, it bothers me so badly. It bothers me so badly when it's like there is so many examples of women just being in secular society, women who do not have scruples or tenacity towards their marriage, that they make exit plans, they have wandering eyes, they're always looking for a better deal. They're technically being hypergamous, meaning that they're just willing to drop the guy that they have that's been providing for them for the better, Chad that comes along. And I understand her being upset with him. I understand. But at the same time, this just, When Martin did return home, a full month after his wife took this step, he was walking into a firestorm, and he knew it. In view of his absence from both his agricultural seed and his generational seed, and the consequent estrangement between him and his wife, Martin's insistence to Joseph that he had to take the manuscript home becomes understandable. Martin told his son from his second marriage, Martin Jr., many times that he obtained the manuscript to show his wife in order to convince her of the truth of the Book of Mormon, as she was very bitter against the work. See, reported in William Wallace White Journal, May 15th, 1904. My thanks to Nathan Hadfield for making me aware of this source, and to Corey L. Evans for sharing it with me. When we realize the magnitude of Martin's absences from the family, the reason for his wife's bitterness becomes clear. Yes, I can understand the bitterness, but making an exit plan beforehand. Anyway. Just ask me how I really feel about things like that. Anyway, after making such tremendous sacrifices at his family's expense, Martin needed some way of demonstrating to the family that he had not lost his mind, but had stayed away from the farm and family and even his daughter's wedding for a good cause, for a book that would do good in the world and would sell sufficiently for the family to recoup their growing investment in it. To have any hope of reconciliation with his wife, he needed something to show for his absence. The crime. Likely using Martin or Joseph as a source, Lucy Mack Smith provides us with some details of what transpired when Martin went home with the manuscript. On his arrival at Palmyra, Martin was not slow in acting on his hard-won permission to show the manuscript to the 5 designated family members. You can see Lavina Fielding Anderson in Lucy's book, a critical edition of Lucy Mack Smith's family memoir. But because the purpose of bringing the document home was to palliate, P-A-L-L-I-A-T-E, palliate. That's a new one for me. It seems like placate, but not quite the same. Palliate his family by showing them the impressive contents of the book, he more than likely stretched the permission to include other family members, aside from the 5, including the daughter and new son-in-law whose nuptials he had missed for the book's sake. Lucy Harris was apparently pleased with what she saw and heard of the manuscript, and she gave him permission to lock it in her bureau, which was presumably the most secure location in their house. However, shortly after Martin arrived back in Palmyra with the manuscript, a very particular friend called on him while Lucy was out, and Martin did not know where the bureau key was. The friend's curiosity was much excited, and he earnestly desired to see the manuscript. Martin, for his part, was eager to please the friend by displaying the fruit of his scribal labors. Not wanting to wait for Lucy to return, Martin broke into his wife's bureau by picking the lock, and, in the process, both injured his lady's bureau considerably and violated the covenant he had made with God. On his wife's return and discovery of the damage to her bureau, an intolerable storm ensued. Martin took possession of the manuscript again, storing it in his own set of drawers where he had it at his command, and showing it to any good friend who happened to call on him. You can see Anderson's book for that. According to Martin's later recitation about the manuscript pages during this time, he read them in the evenings to his family and some friends, afterwards always being sure to put them in his bureau in the parlor, locking both bureau and parlor and putting the keys of each in his pocket. William W. Blair, footnote in comment in Lucy Mack Smith's biographical sketches of Joseph Smith the Prophet and his progenitors for many generations. That's the source for those details. After following this routine one night, and then leaving for a few days' trip, Martin never saw the manuscript again. When he went to retrieve the manuscript upon his return, it was gone. He cross-examined his wife and frantically tore open beds and pillows, but all to no avail. If Lucy Harris knew anything, she would not admit it, even under duress. See Anderson's Lucy's book. For this loss, another of a much more personal nature occurred for Joseph and Emma in Harmony. Shortly after Martin's departure, their first child was born and died. Joseph nursed his weak and grief-stricken wife through the weeks that followed, but as time wore on without word from Martin, another burden weighed on Joseph's mind. Emma, knowing her husband's worry over the book, urged him to leave her in her mother's care and go to Palmyra and learn what detained Martin. Joseph's 1839 histories implies that he had good reason to worry at this time, that letting Martin take the manuscript had led to disaster. Joseph recounted that after Martin left with the manuscript, the angel came and rebuked Joseph for asking permission again to let Martin take the manuscript after being twice refused. In consequence of this impertinence, Moroni took from him the sacred relics and suspended his gift of seeing. See Smith, History of the Church. During Joseph's journey of a few days by stagecoach from Pennsylvania to Palmyra, During Joseph's journey of a few days by stagecoach from Pennsylvania to the Palmyra, Manchester area, he was so distressed over the loss of his child, his wife's poor health, and the feared loss of the manuscript that he scarcely slept. When he neared Manchester, a kindly fellow passenger, who feared Joseph would fall asleep in the forest along the way and come to disaster, insisted on helping him home. Over the final miles, the stranger led him by the arm, since Joseph would fall asleep as he was walking along every few minutes, according to his mother's account in Lucy's book. Shortly after daybreak, when Joseph had rested a bit, he sent for Martin Harris. The Smiths expected Martin to join them at 8 o'clock for breakfast. He arrived 4.5 hours later, his hat drawn over his eyes. Lucy Mack Smith's dramatic account of what occurred during his visit cannot be improved upon. Quote, "At length, he entered the house, soon after which we sat down to the table, Mr. Harris with the rest. He took up his knife and fork as if he were going to use them, but immediately dropped them. Hiram, observing this, said, 'Martin, why do you not eat? Are you sick?' Upon which Martin Harris pressed his hands upon his temples and cried out in a tone of deep anguish, 'Oh, I have lost my soul! I have lost my soul!' Joseph, who had not expressed his fears till now, sprang from the table, exclaiming, 'Martin, have you lost that manuscript? Have you broken your oath and brought down condemnation upon my head as well as your own?' 'Yes, it's gone,' replied Martin, 'and I know not where.' 'Oh, my God,' said Joseph, clenching his hands, 'all is lost. All is lost. What shall I do? I have sinned. It's I who tempted the wrath of God. I should have been satisfied with the first answer, which I received from the Lord, for he told me that it was not safe to let the writings go out of my possession.' He wept and groaned and walked the floor continually. At length he told Martin to go back and search again. 'No,' said Martin, 'it is all in vain, for I have ripped open beds and pillows, and I know it's not there.' 'Then must I,' said Joseph, 'return to my wife with such a tale as this? I dare not do it, lest I should kill her at once. And how shall I appear before the Lord? Of what rebuke am I not worthy from the angel of the Most High?' Joseph did have to return to his wife with report of the manuscript's disappearance, but he was unable to tell her who had taken it. Any evidence of who the thief or thieves might be was lacking, and while Martin suspected his wife, Lucy Harris denied participating in or knowing anything about the theft. Joseph's initial revelation responding to the manuscript's disappearance, Doctrine and Covenants 3, given in the weeks following, said nothing of the thieves. However, a later revelation, Doctrine and Covenants 10, 1 through 37, recorded in May of 1829, identified the theft as the work of a conspiracy of wicked men who had altered the words which Joseph translated. My analysis of the timing of Doctrine and Covenants 10 has been assisted by a 2011 internship with Joseph Smith Papers Project, where discussions with Michael McKay and Robin Jensen helped clarify my thoughts. Readers of the Revelation appear to have typically imagined the conspirators physically doctoring the original manuscript, taking up lying pens to add invasive text beside or over top of that recorded by Joseph's scribe. On this reading, the Revelation describes a rather clumsy effort to discredit the Book of Mormon. The conspirators would try to palm off as unmodified translation manuscript, a document on which obvious interpolations had been made, with the counterfeit words written over and crammed into narrowed spaces between the authentic words. But Joseph's Revelation does not describe the conspirators against the Book of Mormon making these sorts of interpolations on the manuscript they had taken. Rather, it says they had altered the manuscript's words. The words of translation could be altered in two ways, either by tampering with the original pages or by copying some of them onto fresh pages, imitating the scribe's handwriting, but introducing variant wording into the new copy. Whatever the challenges of convincingly mimicking the handwriting of Martin Harris or other scribes, it would have been less daunting then trying to pass off insertions and overwriting the original text on the translation manuscript. The more intelligible strategy of miscopying the manuscript is a better candidate for what the Revelation calls the conspirators' cunning plan. The Revelation attributes to those who conspired to steal the manuscript several ignoble motives. They had acted in anger to destroy Joseph, to get the glory of the world, and to avoid shame they feared the book's publication would cause them. These men, the Revelation said, had been misled by Satan. These men, the Revelation said, had been misled by Satan, who whispered to them the accusation against Joseph, "He hath deceived you." So they set a trap for Joseph. When he retranslated and published the Book of Mormon, they would identify and publish discrepancies between it and their altered text to show that he had contradicted himself in his two pretended translations. In this way, Satan would stir up people to anger against Joseph, so they would not believe God's words, and thus Satan thinketh to overpower your Joseph's testimony in this generation, that the work might not come forth in this generation. This revelation about the stolen manuscript was published in part in the preface to the 1830 Book of Mormon, to explain to the readers why Nephi's small plates had been substituted for the missing portion of Mormon's abridgment. The suspects. Ooh, this is a nice big section. I'm going to leave this for another day then. And there's lots of footnotes to share in this one too. I'll try and skip ones that are just referencing books, or at least keep them very short. But, oh God. That's just a terrible thing happening all around. Like, I understand Lucy's frustration. That's not fun. In many ways, there is a lot that I get about what she does, and I can understand how it's understandable that she would make an exit plan with him acting in such a way that to her would make her feel like she was in jeopardy. But that is just one of those things that I do not really have good tolerance for. I just never think that it's wise for husband or wife to start setting up their finances in such a way to have an exit plan. Because not only, even if it's in a small way, it opens a door to go, well, I'm not really feeling like I'm getting what I need out of a relationship. And so I'm just going to gently, fund it here and there. And especially if the man is providing more in the relationship, that is tantamount to theft. Theft from the family, theft from the husband especially, betrayal of vows. And if a man starts doing the same thing, it's dereliction of his duty to support his family and his wife. It's dereliction of his children. It's terrible. And this is why having a gospel-centered life is so important, because if both people are determined to make things work, even through the hardest times, and not have an exit strategy, not have a wandering eye, not wishing for something they don't have, then you have a marriage that lasts. But as soon as you start indulging in even small ways, it will grow to the point that it's like, why stick around? I'm not getting what I want. And in the end, there's some sort of selfishness involved. And it's hard. It's hard to do that, because negotiating how your life is with yourself and with your spouse is always a hard task. That you settle in to a normal behavior pattern among your family and among your husband and wife. And it's through little negotiations, whether it's blatantly said out loud or through the unsaid words and actions that occur. And you also negotiate with yourself in unsaid ways, or perhaps said to the Lord, or perhaps said to an empty room about what's going on. So I get it. I get the frustrations. I understand her actions. I still don't like it. There are so many things that I just gutturally have a visceral detestation of. And any actions that head towards exit plans is one of them. At the same time, I understand that there's a time and a place for it. Like, if you seriously have, like, if a guy has a wife who has a wandering eye and you can tell is in the relationship for just getting gain, putting things in the trust and care in the name of a trust under the parent's name to help protect finances. I've seen that come up a couple of times. Seems pretty brilliant. In the same way, if a woman is really being abused, and I mean really, because again, I watch too many train wreck videos on the internet. There's so many times that women are being treated normally, like that the husband loves them and supports them, but the woman doesn't want attention from their husband. They want attention from Chad Strongarm down the road. So suddenly everything the man does is abuse. Oh, he was emotionally abusive. He was emotionally neglective. I'm sorry. He was providing for you, and I'm sorry he wasn't home because he had to go to work to support you and other things like that. They have a very large tendency to take normal actions and make them into stories of abuse. They rewrite history to suit their needs, to leverage what they can to get what they want. And that's natural for all human beings. But there's a particular proclivity and incentive, and it's seen and been documented for women in divorce situations to do that because, well, they can get the children and they can get better alimony. And so even if they were amicably going to be divorced, as soon as lawyers got involved, suddenly the women start claiming abuse. And they start claiming this and they start claiming that, and the men come with, they have to prove their innocence, which is, again, another travesty. They have to record their interactions with their wife when they are denied being able to see their children. And they're denied common courtesy. And they're told that they were abusive or trapping when all they were doing is just knocking on a window saying, hey, it's my time for kid in the back of your car. And they're like, he was entrapping me, towards a court. I'm sorry, I've seen a video recently specifically about that. It's just like, so, like, but women who are actually, truly, honestly being abused, finding a way to extricate themselves from a situation like that is very good. But it's the same way the other way for men. But unfortunately, a lot of men will always put up with the abuse of their wives, whether that's withdrawal, them just bleeding them for resources, but never actually giving anything to the family or their husbands. They'll put up with that because it's expected of them. So either way, anytime there's this tearing at the relationship because the woman has a wandering eye, wants to go with Chad Strongarm down the street, or the guy is starting to make an exit strategy because, he sees the wife withdrawing from him or whatever else, it's just not good. Because it then it will accelerate when you do not open yourself to any type of action that can lead to, oh, I just want an account so that way I can do my own thing. There's problems with that. There's just a lot of problems with that, because even if it started with the greatest of intentions, oh, I just want to do something so I can, surprise my husband with something, or I want to surprise my wife with being able to go to a trip to Bermuda. No, just don't. Just don't do it. If you want to surprise her, save up look over the finances together, say, I have something special for this and I want it to be a surprise, but here are the funds. They're not going anywhere. Don't use them for redoing the bathroom or the kitchen or buying a treadmill. I want to take, or maybe have the surprise be that, or don't have it be a surprise, have it be something you can anticipate together. Say, hey, I want to take you on a trip to Hawaii and here's the funds for it. Or, I don't know. Again, I see these videos about secular relationships imploding on the internet. It's my really bad habit that it's like every once in a while it's like, oh, I need something going in my ear, and I'm like, oh, well, this seems interesting, and it just goes. I am so grateful for a gospel-centered life, because when you both focus on God and your family, you really avoid so many of those problems. Another one that really, 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 really frustrates me, that I viscerally, absolutely abhor, is people who take their life. And that one's funnier because there's a lot of sympathy that I have for people who do that, because ultimately they felt trapped. I feel that sympathy for them. I do. I understand it. But it still just raises my hackles, because it's like, you have to recognize you're never trapped. You never are. The idea of being trapped and there's no way out is always a lie. Always. And that's what's so frustrating about it. But anyways, I'll leave it on that. I don't want to go off on too big of a soapbox. I already have too much, but I hope you enjoy. And next we'll go into that big long section for who the suspects are. So enjoy.